Hercule Poirot knew that even the finest verse could conceal a crime, and the wax-sealed poem scroll held a riddle only he could untangle. Chapter 1. The inciting incident. It was a crisp autumn evening, when the grand ballroom of the Devereux estate, nestled on the outskirts of London, began to feel heavier with a silent tension. The Devereux family, a wealthy aristocratic lineage whose name was synonymous with grandeur and old money, was hosting a lavish masquerade ball, the event of the season. The room shimmered with the glint of crystal chandeliers, and the guests, adorned in their finest gowns and suits, danced and conversed in high spirits. But, as often is the case in a house full of secrets, all was not as it seemed. A sudden scream echoed through the ballroom, its shrill pitch cutting through the symphony of violins and chatter like a blade through silk. The music stopped instantly, as if time itself had frozen. Guests turned, puzzled and alarmed, as a figure in a silver mask rushed to the center of the room. It was Mrs. Eleanor Devereux, the lady of the house, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. Someone is dead," she cried, her voice trembling, barely audible in the stillness that followed. In an instant, the crowd parted, and a group of servants rushed forward to follow Mrs. Devereux's lead. At the far end of the ballroom, behind an intricate tapestry that shielded a small study from view, the lifeless body of Lord Geoffrey Devereux lay sprawled on the floor. He had been the patriarch of the family, a man known for his quiet demeanor and vast wealth, a respected member of society, with a penchant for ancient poetry and rare artifacts. His death, it seemed, had not come in a natural way. The room, normally filled with warmth and the intoxicating scent of roses, now seemed cold and sterile. A single, delicate waxed scroll rested beside him, a parchment, yellowed with age, and embossed with symbols that no one in the room could easily recognize. The wax seal was broken, an ominous detail in itself. It was rare for anyone to break a seal on a document without a significant reason. But who had done it? Why? And what was the riddle contained within this ancient scroll? The police arrived swiftly, but no one seemed to have a plausible explanation for how Lord Devereux had come to meet his untimely end. There were no obvious signs of violence, no knife, no gunshot wound, no poison evident upon first glance. Yet his sudden collapse, along with the mysterious scroll, raised more questions than answers. And it was in this moment of confusion that Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, arrived at the estate. He had been invited by Lady Veronica Devereux, the younger sister of Lord Geoffrey, who had heard of Poirot's unparalleled ability to solve the most intricate of mysteries. Poirot's keen sense of observation and psychological acumen were revered by the high society that often found themselves entangled in webs of deceit. Poirot entered the room with his usual grace, taking in the scene with his precise gaze. His small, sharp eyes flickered over the guests, noting their reactions. The wealthy and influential had gathered in anxious groups, exchanging murmurs, pointing fingers, and offering their condolences in what seemed like the most expected fashion. Poirot observed it all, yet there was something more he was searching for. Mon cher, this is a most peculiar situation, Poirot said softly, his voice filled with his signature calm precision as he approached the scene. A man dies under strange circumstances, and a riddle appears beside him. Such an invitation, non? I shall not decline it. The room fell silent, as though the very air was holding its breath. It was clear the Devereux family was not merely shaken by a loss, they were plunged into a mystery that had no immediate answers. As Poirot stood by Lord Devereux's body, he bent down slightly, his gaze shifting from the scroll to the gathered guests. His mind was already working, parsing through the smallest of details, the wax, the broken seal, the faint traces of an old ink stain on the scroll's edge, and the reaction of each person in the room. There are many things I must know. Poirot murmured more to himself than anyone else. What did you all see? What did you hear? And who amongst you could have done this? To discover the truth, we must first understand the lies we tell ourselves, and thus, Hercule Poirot began his most perplexing case, yet the riddle of the waxed poem scroll. It was a mystery not just of murder, but of poetry riddles, and the intricacies of human nature, a puzzle that only Poirot's little gray cells could unravel. Chapter 2. The First Clust. Guests were still gathered in uneasy clusters when Poirot approached the scene with measured steps, his sharp eyes flickering from one face to another, all the while taking in every minute detail. His reputation had preceded him, and now, as the room fell into a heavy silence, he began his inspection with a methodical calmness that seemed to unsettle the onlookers. Even more than the murder itself, the body of Lord Geoffrey de Verrel remained where it had fallen, still and lifeless, his face frozen in a mask of confusion and pain. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he examined the waxed scroll beside the body, noting the deep impression of the seal in the soft wax, and the way it had been torn open deliberately, with care. His gloved fingers brushed against the parchment, a trace of powdered residue dusting his fingertips. Poirot stood for a moment, contemplating, before he turned his gaze towards the broken furniture nearby. A chair had been overturned, though it was placed at an odd angle, as if it had been pushed aside hastily rather than knocked over in a struggle. He crouched beside it, his brow furrowing as he inspected the floor beneath. A faint trail of dust, disturbed only slightly, pointed towards the far corner, where a small bookshelf stood with an assortment of aged books. No one had yet noticed the subtle marks left in the dust except Poirot. There is something here, but not enough, Poirot muttered quietly, his voice just loud enough for Lady Veronica, who had been standing nearby, to hear. She stepped closer, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. Her face, pale and drawn, was a study of distress. Detective Poirot, is there any hope of finding the killer? Lord Geoffrey's death, it simply cannot be true. He was beloved by everyone, she whispered, her voice trembling. Poirot turned to face her, his eyes sharp and alert, as though seeing through her words and into the emotions behind them. He studied her for a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremble in her hands, the hint of uncertainty that she tried so hard to conceal. Madame de Verrel, it is not yet time for despair, Poirot said gently, his words soft yet deliberate. It is time for clarity. Let us see what the evidence tells us. The truth is often buried beneath the surface, sometimes it is hidden in plain sight. He returned to the body, kneeling beside it with precise care, his gloved fingers lightly pressed against Lord Geoffrey's wrist, checking for any trace of life that might still remain. There was none. Poirot's eyes remained fixed on the face of the deceased, his mind whirring through possibilities. The waxed scroll intrigued him most. What was it doing here? Why had it been placed so carefully beside Lord Geoffrey? Was it simply a message, or was there more to it? He turned it over once again, his sharp gaze tracing every curve of the delicate writing, every crease in the paper. He noticed something. The ink, while faded in places, had a peculiar sheen to it. It wasn't the work of just any pen. It appeared to have been written with a quill. The script was elegant, but there was an underlying heaviness to the words. Poirot's thoughts raced as he continued his inspection. Beside the scroll, there was another strange detail. A delicate perfume lingered faintly in the air, one that seemed out of place. It wasn't the scent worn by any of the women in the room, at least not anyone who had been near the body. He followed the scent subtly, his eyes scanning the faces of the guests, who now watched him closely, unsure of what his next move would be. Poirot's gaze shifted back to the scroll. There was no obvious clue to the identity of the killer, but his instincts told him that there was something far more intricate at play here. This was no ordinary crime. Lord Geoffrey's murder seemed to carry with it a deeper significance, something personal, something buried beneath the veneer of high society. The scroll was, Poirot deduced, more than just a random piece of evidence. "I must speak with your servants," Poirot said abruptly, standing up and straightening his posture. "They are often the ones who see things others do not." Lady Veronica nodded, her expression a mix of frustration and helplessness. She gestured towards the nearby corridor, where several staff members were waiting anxiously. They too had been questioned, but their accounts so far had revealed little. Poirot had little faith in their initial statements that as the servants were brought in, Poirot's questioning began. His approach was precise, calm, and deliberate. Each servant was asked to recall their movements during the evening, their interactions with Lord Geoffrey, and their observations of the other guests. Nothing stood out at first glance except for one detail that struck Poirot immediately: the butler. Thomas had been the last to speak to Lord Geoffrey before the murder. He had been delivering a tray of drinks to the study, which was the last place anyone had seen the deceased alive. According to Thomas, Lord Geoffrey had been in the midst of reading when the butler arrived and had appeared. Distracted, lost in thought, perhaps, but it wasn't the peculiar behavior that Poirot focused on. It was the small matter of a slip of paper hidden in Thomas's hand that had caught his attention. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he glanced up from his notebook. "Monsieur Thomas," he began, his voice low but commanding, "what do you have in your hand?" Thomas paled, fumbling for words, but the evidence was clear. He had been hiding something. Poirot's suspicions were beginning to take shape, and the investigation was far from over. Every detail, Poirot muttered under his breath, no matter how insignificant, must be examined. "The truth, I believe, will reveal itself in time." The first clues were now beginning to unravel, and Hercule Poirot knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of a riddle that would require all his faculties to solve. Chapter 3: The Gathering of Suspects. Air in the study had thickened with suspicion, every glance now a potential clue, every word laden with hidden meaning. Hercule Poirot had made his observations, and now it was time for the gathering. The house was alive with whispers and nervous energy as the guests were ushered into the parlor, where Poirot had arranged his informal conference. Lady Veronica, still pale from the shock, had reluctantly agreed to summon the individuals who had been closest to Lord Geoffrey, each one an apparent suspect, yet none of them more guilty than the next. The first to arrive was Thomas, the butler, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his face pale from the questioning. He had been the last to see Lord Geoffrey alive, and it was the look of discomfort in his eyes that had made Poirot scrutinize him so thoroughly. As Thomas stepped into the room, Poirot's sharp gaze swept over him with quiet intensity, measuring every tiny shift in his body language. The butler's nervousness was palpable, but Poirot made no immediate comment. Next came Lady Veronica herself, her dress rustling softly as she entered. Her composure seemed slightly more intact now, though her eyes betrayed the weight of the night's events. She was followed by Evelyn, Geoffrey's daughter, a young woman with a fiery temperament that often flared under stress. Evelyn's face was flushed, either from emotion or from the wine she had consumed earlier in the evening. She sat stiffly beside her mother, casting furtive glances around the room, clearly uncomfortable. The final guest to be summoned was the enigmatic professor, Dr. Edward Ravenscroft, a scholar of ancient texts and poetry. Dr. Ravenscroft had been a close friend of Lord Geoffrey's for many years. His presence at the ball was no surprise, but his aloof nature and quiet intelligence made him an interesting figure. He was not one to show his emotions openly, but his penetrating stare seemed to analyze everyone around him, as though Poirot were not the only one interested in uncovering the truth. Poirot took a step forward, addressing the group as he gestured for them to take their seats. He had been observing them all, but now it was time for them to turn their eyes upon him. "My dear friends," Poirot began, his voice smooth and calm, "this is a most regrettable occasion. I have asked you to gather here not for accusations, but for answers. You are all here because you were in some way connected to Lord Geoffrey de Virale. Each of you has a story, a motive, or perhaps a secret that is yet to be revealed." Lady Veronica flinched at the word motive, but Poirot pressed on. He could see that all of them were hiding something, and it was in their silences that the clues would be found. To begin, Poirot continued, "I must ask you each to reflect on your interactions with Lord Geoffrey this evening. What did you see? What did you hear? Was there anything unusual in his behavior? Anything that might have tipped you off to what was to come?" The group exchanged uneasy glances, none of them eager to speak first. Poirot let the silence linger for a moment before he turned to Thomas, the butler. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing slightly, "you were the last person to speak with Lord Geoffrey before his death. Tell me, what was he like in those final moments?" Thomas swallowed, his throat dry. He glanced at Lady Veronica for support, but she seemed too distracted to offer any comfort. He was fine, sir," Thomas said, his voice wavering slightly. "He was reading." "Yes, reading a scroll, I believe. He didn't seem upset, no more than usual." But he hesitated, and Poirot's attention sharpened. "But what?" Poirot pressed, his voice unwavering. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "But he did seem distracted, sir. He kept staring at the scroll, his brow furrowed, like he was trying to make sense of something. He didn't really notice me comin'." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A scroll, you say? Interesting. What of the others? Did anyone else notice anything strange about Lord Geoffrey this evening?" Lady Veronica, who had remained quiet until now, spoke up. "He wasn't acting like himself," she said, her voice a little too steady. "He seemed distant, like he had something weighing on his mind. But Geoffrey always had his moods. It was nothing to be concerned about." Poirot's sharp eyes studied her face for any sign of deception, but there was nothing overt. She was either well practiced in hiding her emotions, or she truly didn't know anything more than she was letting on. Evelyn, who had been watching the proceedings with a mix of impatience and curiosity, suddenly leaned forward. "I'll admit," she said, her voice edged with frustration, "he was acting strangely earlier. But then again, he always had these episodes. No one was ever certain what was bothering him. But he refused to talk about it." Poirot's gaze flicked from Evelyn to her mother, and then to Dr. Ravenscroft, who had been quietly observing the exchange. He was the last person to speak, and Poirot turned to him now, eager to hear what the scholar had to offer. Dr. Ravenscroft sighed softly, adjusting his glasses. "Lord Geoffrey was deeply troubled," he said, his voice measured. "It's true, but not in the way you might think. He was obsessed with something from his past, something he thought had been long buried. Do you know what that was?" Poirot asked, his curiosity piqued. Ravenscroft shook his head. "I cannot say for certain, but I believe it had something to do with a poem, an ancient poem, one that Lord Geoffrey had been translating for years. He believed it contained the key to a great family secret, a secret that could change everything." Poirot paused, his mind racing. The waxed scroll, the obsession, the family secrets, everything was beginning to fall into place, but not enough to make sense of the bigger picture. The mystery was deepening, and the suspects, each one hiding something, were more interconnected than they appeared. Chapter 4. Poirot arrived there in the parlor was thick with tension, every word spoken under the shadow of Lord Geoffrey's untimely death. Poirot, ever the meticulous observer, had listened intently as the guests spoke of their interactions with the deceased, each one adding more layers to the puzzle. Yet there was something about the way they spoke, some hesitations, some carefully chosen words that made him more certain than ever. that he was not dealing with a simple crime of passion or accident. His mind worked swiftly, sifting through the growing web of clues, but he knew that it was not enough yet. He needed more. He needed to understand the dynamics between the family and their closest associates. It was at that moment that Poirot, satisfied with the information gleaned so far, stood up and made his way to the center of the room. With his small stature, perfectly tailored suit, and unmistakable air of authority, he had an aura of someone used to commanding the attention of others. As the room quieted, Poirot's gaze swept over the assembled group. The tension in the room seemed to increase in response to his calm, methodical demeanor. "My friends," Poirot began, his voice steady and reassuring, "I have listened carefully to your words, but I must confess, I find myself with more questions than answers. There are things that do not add up, and until I am convinced otherwise, I will continue to ask my questions, and I shall not be satisfied with half-truths." Lady Veronica stiffened at his words, but she said nothing. Evelyn's eyes darted nervously from her mother to Poirot, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Ravenscroft's cool expression remained unchanged, but there was a subtle tension in his posture, as though he, too, was trying to hide something. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then, with the faintest of smiles, he turned towards Thomas, the butler, whose nerves had begun to fray under the scrutiny. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, his voice unwavering, "you spoke of Lord Geoffrey's mood, of his preoccupation with the scroll, but you did not tell us what you saw when you entered the study that final time. Did you notice anything unusual? Anything that could have led to his death?" Thomas looked visibly uncomfortable. He shifted on his feet, his eyes darting to Lady Veronica before answering. "I told you all I know, sir. Lord Geoffrey seemed distracted. That's all I can say. He didn't speak much. I left the tray by his side and left." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "And yet, Monsieur Thomas, you said you saw him staring at the scroll. Was there anything peculiar about it? A gesture? A moment of realization?" The butler hesitated for a long time before he finally spoke, his voice low. "There was something odd about it. Lord Geoffrey seemed almost mesmerized by the scroll, as if he were trying to decipher something hidden in the writing. But then when I turned to leave, he suddenly looked up at me, startled, like he'd been pulled from a trance." Poirot's eyes flicked toward the waxed scroll, still resting on the table where it had been left. He walked over to it, his fingers lightly brushing the edge of the parchment. "And this scroll," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. "It is clearly important, but I must ask, why would it be here, in this place, and not in the hands of someone who understands its significance?" He turned back to the group, his sharp gaze meeting each suspect's eyes in turn. The room felt colder now, as though the air had thickened with the weight of Poirot's attention. "There is more at play here than simple family squabbles or misunderstandings," Poirot continued, his voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "The secrets that bind this household run deeper than any of you care to admit. But I will find the truth, whether you are willing to reveal it or not." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, with deliberate calmness, Poirot addressed each of them individually. "Lady Veronica, you spoke of your brother's habits and his moods, but you did not mention his obsession with that poem. Perhaps you knew more than you let on?" Lady Veronica stiffened but did not speak. Her lips pressed tightly together. "Evelyn," Poirot continued, turning his attention to Geoffrey's daughter, "you mentioned your father's tendency to keep secrets. Could it be that this scroll is a key to something far more significant? Something your father was unwilling to share?" Evelyn shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, but her lips remained sealed. Poirot turned to Dr. Ravenscroft, who had remained silent for much of the questioning. "And you, Monsieur Ravenscroft, as a scholar of ancient texts, you must understand the significance of this scroll. Tell me, did you help Lord Geoffrey with his translation work?" Dr. Ravenscroft's eyes flickered briefly, but his expression remained impassive. "I assisted him in the past, yes, but that was some time ago. I haven't been involved in his studies recently." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind processing every word. He could feel the layers of the mystery slowly beginning to peel away, but there was much left to uncover. He knew one thing for certain: these people were not simply bystanders. They were deeply involved in this web of deception and secrecy, and each one of them had something to hide. "I will continue my investigation," Poirot said, his voice sharp and clear, "and I assure you, the truth will come to light. It always does. No one can escape their own secrets forever." As the group began to disperse, Poirot's mind was already working, piecing together the small fragments of the puzzle: the waxed scroll, the strange behavior of Lord Geoffrey, the whispered words of the butler. All of it pointed to something far more sinister than any of them had yet realized. But Poirot knew that the answer lay not just in the facts, but in the delicate web of human emotions, motivations, and contradictions. And as the evening wore on, Hercule Poirot would dig deeper, seeking the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. Chapter 5. Initial interviews begin. Thar had grown late, and the grand manor house was shrouded in shadows. The guests, though still shaken by the unsettling events of the evening, had dispersed to their rooms. Yet Hercule Poirot remained in the study, his mind sharp, analyzing every detail with precision. He had spoken to the group, but there was more to be uncovered. There always was. Now, it was time to delve deeper into each person's story, to understand the subtle contradictions in their words and their actions. Poirot's first target was Thomas, the butler, a man whose nerves had been stretched thin, yet whose fear masked something more. A well-trained servant, yes, but it was the way he'd hesitated earlier that intrigued Poirot. Thomas stood in front of him now, the butler's face still drawn tight with anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, you must understand I only did my duty. I delivered the tray, as I was instructed." Poirot's sharp eyes scanned Thomas's features. "Indeed, Monsieur Thomas, but your words do not match your demeanor. You were the last person to see Lord Geoffrey alive, and yet your recollection of the events is vague. A simple 'I left the tray.' This does not satisfy me. Tell me more about your interaction with the master." Thomas swallowed, beads of sweat appearing on his brow despite the coolness of the room. "He was absorbed, sir, in that scroll of his. He barely noticed I had come in. He was staring at it, turning it over, mumbling something under his breath. But when I left, he looked up suddenly, startled, like he had just realized I was there." Poirot's fingers gently tapped on the edge of the desk. A curious reaction. Nest's pause? To be so absorbed in the contents of a scroll. What was it that caught his attention, do you think? Was it the words, or something else? I don't know, sir," Thomas replied, shaking his head. "But there was something strange about the way he acted. He didn't seem like himself." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And why do you think that is, Monsieur Thomas? Was there something that had changed in him recently? Something that would explain his distraction?" The butler shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. "Lord Geoffrey had been acting oddly for some time, sir. He spoke less, stayed in his study for hours, scribbling away at that scroll. But I didn't think much of it at the time." Poirot nodded slowly, absorbing the information. The man was hiding something, but for now, Poirot let him go, knowing that his turn would come. "Thank you, Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said softly, his voice betraying none of his thoughts. "Please return to your duties." As Thomas exited the study, Poirot turned his attention to Lady Veronica, who had been standing silently at the far corner of the room. She had watched the exchange carefully, her expression unreadable. It was time to speak with her. "Madame de Verrel," Poirot began, his voice calm but insistent. You mentioned earlier that your brother, Lord Geoffrey, had been distracted. You seemed hesitant in your words. What, precisely, were you trying to convey? Lady Whodunit's face flushed, and she hesitated before answering, a thin line of tension forming between her brows. I was concerned for Geoffrey, yes. He had been so absorbed in that scroll. I thought it was strange. He had never been one to fixate on things, but this. It was different. I feared something was troubling him. Poirot tilted his head slightly. Troubling him in what way, madam? Was it simply the poetry, or was there something more? Something he feared in the scroll? Her eyes shifted nervously. It wasn't just the poetry, I think. Geoffrey was always a quiet man, but this was more than that. He seemed paranoid, even. He thought the scroll contained something important, something hidden, but he never told me what. Poirot's fingers gently drummed against the armrest of the chair as he processed her words. What did he think he had discovered, madam? What secret was he convinced was there? I don't know, she admitted, her voice faltering. He never shared it with me. He said he would tell me when the time was right, but he never did. Perhaps it was something that could have changed the Devereux legacy. The mention of the Devereux legacy piqued Poirot's interest. A family secret, perhaps? Something tied to the bloodline, hidden for generations? The possibilities were multiplying. Thank you, Lady Veronica, Poirot said softly. I shall speak with others now. But remember, madam, your brother's secrets may be the key to understanding his death. Do not hold back anything you might know. Lady Veronica nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes as she stepped back. She, too, had a role to play in this delicate web. Next, Poirot turned his attention to Evelyn, Geoffrey's daughter. The young woman had been restless throughout the evening, her sharp features betraying the frustration she tried to conceal. As she sat across from him, Poirot studied her with a keen eye. Mademoiselle Evelyn, Poirot began, his voice gentle yet probing. You mentioned that your father had a tendency to keep secrets. Can you think of any that might be relevant now? Anything he might have wanted to protect? Evelyn's gaze darkened for a moment, her fingers clenching in her lap. My father was a difficult man. He kept things to himself, yes, but I don't know what secrets he had, Poirot. All I know is that he was more and more distant these last few weeks. He barely spoke to me. The scroll seemed to consume him, and he wouldn't even explain why. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. And you, mademoiselle, do you have any thoughts on why your father chose to confide in others? Perhaps in someone like Dr. Ravenscroft. Evelyn's jaw clenched at the mention of the scholar's name. I didn't trust Dr. Ravenscroft, she said firmly. He was always too eager to involve himself in my father's work. I don't know what his true motives were, but he always had a way of making Geoffrey think that he needed his help. Poirot's eyes glinted with understanding. Aha, perhaps it is Dr. Ravenscroft who holds a crucial piece of the puzzle. The more Poirot spoke with the suspects, the clearer it became that they each knew far more than they had let on. Secrets were buried beneath their composed exteriors, and only through careful questioning would Poirot be able to uncover the truth. But for now, he would let them go, knowing that they had given him the first hints he needed to proceed. As Evelyn stood and left the room, Poirot's mind raced. The investigation was unfolding like an intricate tapestry, its threads pulling tighter with each passing moment. The truth, he knew, was within his grasp. He simply had to be patient. Chapter 6, First False-Led investigation had taken a deliberate turn, with each conversation adding a layer of complexity to the case. Hercule Poirot had begun to piece together a narrative, yet the puzzle was far from complete. Each piece revealed another question, another angle to consider. But it wasn't just the evidence that intrigued him, it was the people themselves, the way they interacted with each other, the way their stories interwove and contradicted one another was a reflection of something deeper. something hidden beneath their carefully curated exteriors. As Poirot sat in the study, reviewing his notes and contemplating the situation, a sudden knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. It was Thomas, the butler, looking more anxious than ever. "Monsieur Poirot," Thomas said, his voice shaky. I've just learned something. I didn't think it would be important, but now, I'm not so sure." Poirot raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Come in, Monsieur Thomas. Sit. Tell me what has caused you such distress." Thomas hesitated before stepping inside. He glanced around the room, almost as if making sure no one else was listening, before speaking in a low tone. "It's about Dr. Ravenscroft. The night before Lord Geoffrey was killed, I saw him well. I saw him in the study." Poirot leaned forward, his attention fully on the butler. "Dr. Ravenscroft was in the study?" he repeated, his voice calm, though his mind raced. "And what was he doing?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't see him clearly, but I heard him talking to Lord Geoffrey. They were discussing the scroll, the one that Geoffrey had been so obsessed with. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but it sounded heated. Lord Geoffrey was raising his voice, and Dr. Ravenscroft, he sounded very calm, almost too calm. I could hear their words echoing down the hallway, but I didn't dare interrupt." Poirot's eyes flickered with understanding. This was a valuable clue, but it was also a potential misdirection. It was easy to get swept up in these types of half-formed truths, to let suspicion cloud judgment. "Merci, Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, taking note of the information. "You have been helpful, but I must caution you what you have heard may not be as it seems. The truth, like the scroll, is a delicate thing, and sometimes what appears to be a clue is only another layer of deception." As Thomas left the room, Poirot's mind worked furiously. The idea that Dr. Ravenscroft had been involved with Lord Geoffrey just before his death seemed like a significant breakthrough, but Poirot was not one to rush to conclusions. There were too many variables, too many possible motives. He needed more. Poirot stood and walked over to the window, gazing out at the sprawling grounds of the estate. The evening was drawing to a close, and the darkness outside seemed to mirror the murkiness of the case. Yet Poirot felt the familiar excitement bubbling beneath the surface. He was closer than ever. The threads were there, he just had to pull at them until the truth unraveled. Suddenly, there was another knock at the door, and Poirot turned to face the entrance as Lady Veronica entered. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together as though she had something important to say. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice a little unsteady, "I must speak with you. There is something I haven't told you, something I should have mentioned earlier." Poirot motioned for her to sit. "Please, Lady Veronica, you may tell me anything. It is only through truth that we will find the way forward." She hesitated before continuing. "I didn't think it was relevant at the time, but now I see that perhaps it is. The night before my brother's death, I saw something unusual in the study. I didn't think much of it then, but now I wonder." Poirot's eyes never left her face, his expression unreadable. "What did you see, madam?" Lady Veronica took a deep breath before speaking. "I saw a figure, a man, but not anyone I recognized. He was standing in the shadows, near the back of the study, when I entered. I didn't see his face, but he was tall, and he had a strange air about him. It was as though he didn't belong there." Poirot's mind raced as he processed her words. "A man, and what did this man do when you saw him?" "He didn't react when I saw him," she replied, her eyes darting away from him. "I thought it was just my imagination, but now, I wonder if it had something to do with Geoffrey's death." Poirot stood still for a moment, contemplating the information. A mysterious figure in the study, lurking in the shadows. This was a significant development. But who could the man be? And why had Lady Veronica failed to mention this detail earlier? "Madam, this is crucial information," Poirot said after a moment. The person you saw in the shadows, did he appear to be aware of your presence? Did he seem to have any connection to your brother?" Lady Veronica shook her head. "I don't know. I didn't see enough of him to make any assumptions. But I've been thinking about it since, and it troubles me. Who was he? And why was he there?" Poirot nodded slowly, his mind already working through the possibilities. The mystery deepened, but with every new clue, Poirot knew that they were getting closer to the truth. Still, one thing was clear: this was not a straightforward murder. There were hidden layers, and each one was carefully constructed to mislead. "Merci, madam," Poirot said, his voice firm. "This is important, and I will make it a priority to learn more. But remember, each detail must be examined with care. What you saw may not be as it seems." As Lady Veronica left the study, Poirot felt a surge of determination. The pieces were coming together, but he needed more. The mysterious figure, Thomas's overheard conversation, Lady Verinitza's new revelation, they all pointed to something much larger than a simple crime of passion. Poirot turned to face the room, his expression one of quiet resolve. The game was afoot, and he would not rest until the truth was uncovered. The first false lead had been laid before him, but Poirot was always one step ahead. Chapter 7. The Psychological Gamut. Following morning, the Devereux estate was thick with an oppressive quiet. The grand manor, usually bustling with the sound of servants and the gentle hum of high society's affairs, now felt like a mausoleum, a place where the weight of Lord Geoffrey's death hung heavy in the air. Hercule Poirot, as always, was unaffected by the chill of the atmosphere. He had learned long ago that the key to solving any mystery was not in the facts alone, but in the subtleties, the fleeting expressions, the unspoken tensions, the things people tried hardest to conceal. He had spoken with each of the guests and servants, gathered their accounts and observations, and now it was time to begin the next phase of his investigation. It was time to turn the psychological screw. Poirot's mind was already racing as he sat at his desk, reviewing the information at hand. Lady Verinitza's story about the mysterious figure in the study had raised questions, but there were too many unknowns for it to provide clarity just yet. Dr. Ravenscroft's calm, almost detached demeanor was another point of interest, and Evelyn, so young, so eager to speak of her father's secrets. Each of them had something to hide, but it was the way they hid it that Poirot found most revealing. The detective knew the game was shifting now. It was no longer about collecting facts. It was about forcing the suspects to reveal themselves. To do this, Poirot would need to put pressure on them. See how they reacted when the walls began to close in. First, he decided to speak with Dr. Ravenscroft, whose aloofness intrigued him. The scholar had been a quiet observer up until now, and Poirot suspected he was hiding something beneath his calm exterior. Poirot made his way to the library, where Dr. Ravenscroft was seated, absorbed in a large volume of ancient texts. The professor barely looked up as Poirot entered, his glasses gleaming under the dim light. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Dr. Ravenscroft said with a slight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I trust you're finding your way through this rather peculiar situation." Poirot nodded, taking a seat opposite the scholar. "Indeed, Monsieur Ravenscroft. Peculiar is one word for it, but I would say it is far more than that. A man is dead, and it seems no one is without their share of secrets." The professor's gaze flickered for a moment, though he quickly masked it with a polite nod. "I understand your position, of course, but as I've already stated, I have no insight into what happened last night. My association with Lord Geoffrey was purely professional. We were discussing old texts, nothing more." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes never leaving the scholar's face. "Ah, but what if I told you that the matter at hand involves a poem, a riddle of sorts, one that your late friend, Lord Geoffrey, spent his last days trying to decipher?" Dr. Ravenscroft stiffened imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. A poem. I'm afraid I don't see how that's relevant. Lord Geoffrey had many interests, some of which were less conventional. But a poem hardly seems to be the issue here. Poirot smiled faintly. Yet the poem, monsieur, seems to be at the center of this whole affair. Perhaps it was not the poem that troubled Lord Geoffrey, but rather something within it, something that someone wanted very badly to keep hidden. The scholar's expression shifted just slightly, and Poirot caught the faintest narrowing of his eyes. It was enough. He had struck a chord. Of course, Poirot, Dr. Ravenscroft said, his voice cold now. You are free to draw your own conclusions, but I assure you, I am not involved in any conspiracy. I have done nothing to harm Lord Geoffrey. Poirot allowed a beat of silence to pass, weighing the man's words carefully. Perhaps, but monsieur, it is not always what is said that holds the truth. It is what is left unsaid. A detail, a slip, something that does not match the story. And it is those very things that tell me you know far more than you are willing to admit. Dr. Ravenscroft's face betrayed no emotion, but Poirot knew that he had made a small dent. The professor's discomfort, though well hidden, was now evident to Poirot's trained eye. He had revealed enough to warrant further investigation. I will speak with you later. Monsieur Ravenscroft, Poirot said, his tone becoming lighter. Perhaps in time you will remember something else, something pertinent. As Dr. Ravenscroft left the room, Poirot's thoughts turned inward. The professor's reaction had been more telling than any confession. There was something about that poem, something Lord Geoffrey had uncovered, that had set off a chain of events neither the professor nor the family could control. The riddle wasn't just a puzzle. It was a key perhaps to a hidden family secret, or something far more dangerous. Poirot stood and made his way back to the parlor, where Lady Veronica was waiting, her face a mask of uncertainty. It was time to turn his attention to her, to press her further. He had no doubt she was hiding something, but what? Lady Veronica, Poirot began, as she rose to greet him. You seem troubled. Perhaps you have more to share with me now, more than what you've told me before. Her eyes flickered nervously, and she clasped her hands tightly in front of her. I've already told you everything I know, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice faltering ever so slightly. Poirot's expression softened, but only just. Ah, but there is always more, madam. It is human nature to conceal things, sometimes even from ourselves. But I assure you, I am here to help, to understand. The pressure was building, and Poirot could see it. The psychological game had begun. Now, all he had to do was wait for the cracks to form. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery day was drawing to a close, the shadows lengthening across the Devereux estate, and Hercule Poirot was growing more convinced that the murder of Lord Geoffrey Devereux was but one part of a much larger puzzle. He had spent hours speaking with each of the suspects, carefully analyzing their every word, every gesture, but there was still something elusive about this case, a key piece that had yet to fall into place. And as always, Poirot knew that the truth, however carefully hidden, would eventually reveal itself. He was pacing in the study, reviewing his notes, when a sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Monsieur Poirot. It was the housekeeper, Mrs. Bentley, looking more flustered than usual. There's been another incident, an alarming one, I dare say. Poirot's brow furrowed as he approached the door. Another incident? Tell me, Mrs. Bentley, what has happened? The housekeeper hesitated before speaking, her voice low. It's Mr. Thomas the butler. I found him in the garden, outside by the hedge maze, late this afternoon. He was acting strangely, as though he was looking for something, or perhaps someone. And then he collapsed. I called for help immediately, and he's been brought inside. Poirot's mind raced. A second incident so soon after the murder. He followed Mrs. Bentley to the garden without a word, his sharp gaze scanning every detail as they walked. The garden, normally a peaceful refuge from the mansion's opulence, now felt like a place of foreboding, its hedges casting long, sinister shadows. When they reached the hedge maze, Poirot found Thomas lying on the ground, his face pale and sweating, a look of distress still etched on his features. The butler had been helped to a chair by a few of the other servants, but his hands were trembling, and his eyes darted nervously round the garden, as though he feared something or someone was watching him. Poirot approached Thomas, crouching down to his level. "Monsieur Thomas, what has happened?" he asked, his voice gentle but insistent. "Tell me what you were looking for in the garden." Thomas took a few shaky breaths before answering. I saw something, sir," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "A figure. Someone was in the garden, watching me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A figure? And what did this person do?" "I didn't see clearly. They were standing near the old oak tree, just beyond the maze. But when I approached, they were gone. Just like that." Thomas snapped his fingers in the air to emphasize the suddenness of the disappearance. "I thought I imagined it at first, but then when I looked around, I found this." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, crumpled note. Poirot took the note carefully, noting the way Thomas's hands were still shaking. The detective unfolded the paper with meticulous care, his eyes scanning the words written in an elegant, yet hurried script. "Time is running out. The truth lies within the scroll." Poirot's mind clicked into gear. The scroll, the very object that had been at the center of Lord Geoffrey's obsession, the very object that had been left beside his body. It was more than just a family heirloom or a curious artifact. There was something hidden within it, something that someone was desperate to uncover, or perhaps destroy. Poirot's eyes flicked back to Thomas. "Monsieur, you have seen this figure before, yes? This person who has been lurking in the shadows." Thomas's face contorted with anxiety. No, I haven't seen them before. But I thought I saw them near the study earlier, when I brought in Lord Geoffrey's tea." Poirot nodded slowly, taking in the information. A figure near the study, just before Geoffrey's death, and now this note. Warning of the truth within the scroll. It seemed the pieces were slowly coming together, but there was still much to be clarified. "You did well to bring this to my attention, Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "Now, please, return to your duties. I will speak with you again soon." As Thomas was escorted back inside, Poirot remained in the garden, his mind racing with the implications of this new development. The figure in the garden, the note, the scroll. It was becoming clear that the murder of Lord Geoffrey was not the isolated tragedy it had first appeared to be. Someone was actively trying to uncover or hide something, and Poirot was determined to get to the bottom of it. But just as he was about to return to the house, another thought crossed his mind. He had seen the same figure, or at least someone watching him, in the shadows of the study the previous night. Was it the same person? And what did they know about the scroll? What was it about the poem that had consumed Lord Geoffrey to the point of his death? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound from the manor, a muffled scream, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. He turned sharply, his instincts telling him that something more was about to unfold. Without a word, he began to walk briskly back toward the house, his mind already piecing together the next step in his investigation. Whatever was hidden in that scroll, Poirot was certain now that it was the key to unraveling the mystery of Lord Geoffrey's death. The game had shifted once again, and Poirot was ready to play. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. The muffled scream that pierced the air had sent a ripple of unease through the servants and guests alike. Poirot moved swiftly, his mind calculating the best course of action as he made his way toward the source of the sound. He arrived at the parlor just in time to see Lady Veronica standing by the window, her face pale with alarm, her hands clutching the curtains as though trying to make sense of the chaos outside. "Monsieur Poirot," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. It's Evelyn." She's gone missing. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Missing? The young woman had been an active participant in the investigation, yet now she had disappeared without a trace. The situation was escalating, and Poirot felt the weight of the case pressing heavily upon him. Something was happening beneath the surface, something far more intricate than mere murder. "Please, Lady Veronica, tell me everything you know," Poirot urged. His voice steady but firm. Lady Veronica hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously to the door. "She was just here, not 5 minutes ago. I was in the sitting room, reading, when I heard a noise outside. I thought it was just the wind, but when I looked up, Evelyn was gone. I called for her, but there was no answer. The staff searched the gardens, but no one could find her." Poirot's mind was already working through the possibilities. Evelyn's disappearance couldn't be coincidental. It was too neat, too calculated. Someone had lured her away, or perhaps she had discovered something too dangerous for her to share. "Where did you last see her?" Poirot asked, his gaze piercing. "She was standing by the fireplace," Lady Veronica replied, her voice growing more anxious. "She was upset, but not in a way that seemed alarming. She was just lost in thought. She mentioned something about needing air, about going to study." Poirot's instincts immediately went on alert. The study, the room that had been the epicenter of Lord Geoffrey's obsession with the scroll. Evelyn had been in there the night before, had she not? And now she was gone, possibly connected to the very mystery Poirot was trying to solve. "I must speak to the staff." Immediately, Poirot said, his voice sharp. "We will find her, Lady Veronica. You need not worry, but I must insist on complete cooperation from everyone." Lady Veronica nodded, though her face still bore the strain of fear. As Poirot made his way toward the study, he realized the web was tightening. With Evelyn missing, he could feel the conspiracy deepening, but he needed to remain focused. There were too many variables at play, too many shadows lurking around the truth. Poirot entered the study with deliberate calm, his eyes scanning every detail, his sharp mind piecing together the timeline of the previous evening. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the fire crackling in the hearth. The familiar scent of old books and dust hung in the air. Yet something about the room felt different today. Unnatural. As Poirot's gaze swept over the room, he noticed the waxed scroll still resting on the desk, untouched since the previous evening. A faint trace of ink smudged the edges, as though it had been moved recently, but there was no sign of anyone having disturbed the rest of the room. A key detail stood out to Poirot. The scent of perfume, faint but distinct, lingered near the desk. It was the same fragrance he had detected earlier, when Thomas had spoken about the mysterious figure. Poirot's mind began to churn, connecting the pieces. A person, someone close to the Devereux family, had been in this room. The question was who? As he pondered, there was a soft knock at the door, and Mrs. Bentley entered with a worried expression on her face. "Monsieur Poirot, we've found something," she said, holding up a small, crumpled piece of paper. "It was in the garden, near the hedge maze. We think it's from Miss Evelyn." Poirot took the note, his fingers delicately unfolding the paper. The words were hastily written in a spidery script. "The scroll must never be opened. It's too dangerous. I've seen enough to know I must stop it. I've gone to the place where it all began. Come quickly, before it's too late." Poirot's mind raced as he read the words. Evelyn had left this note in a panic. She had discovered something in the scroll, something dangerous enough to make her run. It was clear that she believed there was a force at play, something much larger than the murder of Lord Geoffrey. Poirot immediately turned to Mrs. Bentley. "Where did you find this?" "By the hedge maze, monsieur. She must have dropped it in her haste." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "The place where it all began." The words echoed in his mind, and with them, a new direction in the investigation was born. Evelyn had gone to the maze. to a place that held more than just memories. It held the key to the mystery. He turned swiftly toward the door. "Prepare the staff, Mrs. Bentley. We are going to the maze. And please, do not allow anyone to leave the grounds until I return." Poirot left the study, his thoughts racing. There was something in the garden, something in that maze that would either solve the case or entrench it in deeper mystery. He had a sense of urgency, knowing that Evelyn's disappearance was not just a random event. It was a deliberate move by someone who feared the truth she might reveal. As Poirot approached the garden, the quiet was deafening. The maze loomed ahead, its twisting paths an echo of the complexity of the case itself. It was time to uncover what had been hidden for so long. The game had changed, and this time, Poirot was no longer the hunter. He was the one being hunted. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue. Maze stretched before him, its hedges towering and dense, the winding paths twisting into the shadows. Poirot felt an unspoken urgency pulsing in his veins. Evelyn's note had been a revelation. Whatever she had discovered, it had driven her to hide, to run, perhaps even to confront whatever it was that had terrified her. Yet, it was also clear she had not gone alone. Someone had led her here, someone who understood exactly what had been set in motion by Lord Geoffrey's obsession with the scroll. Poirot's eyes scanned the perimeter of the maze, mentally calculating where Evelyn might have gone. Her last words had been desperate, and the place where it all began was still an enigma. But the note was a clue, a small, faint, yet telling breadcrumb that could unravel everything. The scroll was the key, but what was hidden inside it? And why did Evelyn believe it must be stopped? Poirot walked through the garden, his sharp eyes flicking over every detail. The evening was cool, the sky now a deep purple, the stars barely visible as the heavy foliage around the maze swallowed any light from the house. It felt like a world apart, one that concealed secrets of its own. As Poirot ventured deeper into the maze, he thought about the sequence of events that had led to this point. There had been whispers, hidden messages, strange behaviors, but one thing stood out above all: the way the people around him had reacted to the presence of the scroll. The anxiety in Lady Vhodunik's voice when she spoke about it, the nervousness of Thomas when he described the final moments with Lord Geoffrey. The puzzle pieces were all here, but they didn't fit together yet. It was then that Poirot's eyes caught something, a slight indentation in the earth, near the base of one of the hedge walls. He knelt down, his gloved hand brushing the ground. At first, it appeared nothing more than a natural dip in the soil, perhaps from the weight of a visitor passing by. But as his fingers moved through the dirt, they brushed against something hard. Poirot's pulse quickened. He cleared the soil away with careful precision, revealing a small, wooden box. It was elegantly carved, its surface worn with age, but still intact. Poirot's heart raced as he gently pried the lid open. Inside, he found something unexpected: a small vial, its contents a faint, glowing liquid. The vial was clearly old, its glass tinted with age, yet still it emitted a soft, eerie glow. Poirot frowned. The discovery was significant, but the vial alone didn't answer the bigger questions. What was this liquid? And why had it been hidden here, so far from the manor? Poirot carefully placed it back in the box and reburied it in the ground, making a mental note of its location. It wasn't enough yet. Not nearly enough. Poirot rose to his feet, looking around the maze once more, his mind turning with calculations and possibilities. He needed more information, but he also knew that Evelyn's note had suggested she was in more danger than he had initially thought. If she had gone to the maze willingly, she was either in pursuit of something critical or, perhaps, running from someone who had threatened her. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he walked along the maze's winding paths. The shadows were heavy now, the air thick with an almost tangible sense of danger. Poirot's sharp gaze darted to every corner, every turn. He could feel the tension mounting. Whoever was behind this was skilled, cunning. They had worked in the shadows, setting traps, leading Evelyn away from the others. And now it was up to him to find the answers before it was too late. As Poirot approached the center of the maze, his mind returned to the connection between the scroll, the strange vial, and the family. There had to be a deeper layer to this, something more than just a murder. Perhaps the riddle lay in the past, within the very bloodline of the Devereux family. They were hiding something about Lord Geoffrey's obsession, something Evelyn had learned. At that moment, Poirot heard a sound of faint rustling of leaves, a whisper of movement. He froze, his mind instantly alert. Someone was nearby. His hand instinctively went to his coat pocket, where he had placed his small, concealed revolver earlier in the evening. He stood still, listening, watching for any sign of movement. There it was again, a faint noise, just ahead, barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He wasn't alone in the maze, moving with the careful precision he was known for. Poirot crept forward, his movements calculated. The figure ahead of him was now visible through the gaps in the hedges. It was a woman, a figure in a dark cloak, her back turned as she paced back and forth. Poirot's heart raced. Was it Evelyn? Had she been trapped here? He took another step forward, and the figure froze, turning sharply to face him. The cloak billowed slightly in the wind, but the woman's face was obscured by the hood. "Mademoiselle?" Poirot called out softly. "Evelyn, is that you?" There was a long, tense moment of silence before the woman spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have followed me." Poirot's pulse quickened, but he remained calm, his voice steady. "You are in danger, mademoiselle. Whatever you have uncovered, whatever truth lies within that scroll, it is too dangerous to keep alone. Come with me." But the woman shook her head, stepping back. "You don't understand. You don't know what's at stake." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, sensing a rising urgency. "Then tell me, mademoiselle. Tell me everything. It is not too late." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. And then, with a small, reluctant nod, Evelyn finally spoke, her voice barely audible in the night. "The scroll. It's not just a poem, Poirot. It's a map." And with those words, the puzzle pieces shifted once again. Chapter 11. Tensions rise. Poirot stood motionless in the maze, his mind racing as Evelyn's words hung in the air like a challenge he had yet to fully comprehend. A map hidden in a poem, and hidden within the scroll. His thoughts scrambled to connect the dots. An ancient poem, an enigmatic scroll, and now, this sudden revelation that it contained a map. But to what? What could it possibly lead to? Evelyn, still cloaked in the shadows of the hedge maze, seemed conflicted. Her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. Poirot knew she was on the verge of revealing something important, but he also sensed her hesitation, as though she was being pushed toward an unknown fate she was unwilling to confront. "You must come with me," Poirot urged softly, his tone firm but not forceful. "This is not something you should face alone. Whatever danger you are running from, it is not too late to undo it." Evelyn took a step back, the weight of her decision pressing on her. She shook her head, a tremor in her voice as she spoke. "You don't understand, Poirot. This isn't just about my father's death. It's about something much bigger, something my family has been hiding for generations." Poirot's brow furrowed. "Your family?" He searched her face for any sign that she was truly ready to confide in him. "Tell me everything, mademoiselle. The truth, however difficult, will be the only way to stop this." She closed her eyes for a moment, as though collecting herself, before taking a deep breath. "The Devereux family. It's not just wealth and power they've inherited, Poirot. There's a legacy of secrets tied to the land, to the very foundation of this estate." Geoffrey had been working on the scroll for months, trying to decipher it, and he believed that the poem was a key to something hidden deep beneath the manor grounds. Poirot's pulse quickened. The manor grounds. He had suspected for some time that there was more to the Devereux estate than met the eye. But a secret buried beneath the house? What could it possibly be? Something hidden? Poirot asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his chest. And what is it that your father discovered? What could be so dangerous? Evelyn's eyes widened with fear as she took another step away from him. I don't know. My father never told me the full truth, but he was convinced that whatever was buried beneath the estate would change everything. He said it would bring ruin if it ever came to light. Poirot pressed further, his mind already racing through the possibilities. And you believe this map in the scroll will lead to what your father was afraid of? Evelyn nodded, her face pale. I didn't want to believe it at first, but now I'm afraid that we're too late. Whatever Geoffrey found, whatever he uncovered, it's already set in motion. Poirot's eyes narrowed, understanding beginning to dawn. So, someone else knows about this secret. Someone who wanted to stop Lord Geoffrey from uncovering the truth. Evelyn's face twisted with confusion and guilt. I don't know who, Poirot, but someone killed my father, and I believe they're trying to find the map, find the place he was searching for. I think that's why I'm being watched. A heavy silence fell between them. Poirot could feel the weight of her words settling in, but he knew they were not enough. There was still so much to uncover, so many questions left unanswered. We must find the place your father was searching for, mademoiselle, Poirot said decisively. But first, we must ensure your safety. If you are correct, and someone is trying to stop us, then they will not hesitate to act again. We must act quickly. Evelyn nodded, but her face was drawn with uncertainty. But where do we even begin? How do we find this place? Poirot took a moment to consider, his mind piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The scroll was clearly at the center of everything, the key to the mystery, the map to the truth. But how to decipher it? I will need to examine the scroll more closely, Poirot said, his voice calm. We need to understand what your father was so afraid of. The map, the symbols, it is all part of the answer. We must return to the estate and gather all the clues we can. Evelyn looked at him, her face a mixture of fear and hope. But what if it's too late? What if whoever is searching for this place already knows where it is? Poirot's gaze softened slightly, though his expression remained determined. We will not let that happen, mademoiselle. I have faced far worse odds before, and I assure you we will find the truth, together. With that, Poirot turned and began leading Evelyn back toward the manor, his mind already turning over the next steps. The game was shifting once again. Whoever was behind Lord Geoffrey's death was not simply after wealth or power. They were after something much deeper, a legacy, a hidden history tied to the land itself. And Poirot was determined to uncover the truth before it was too late. As they walked toward the house, Poirot felt the tension rising. The clock was ticking, and the deeper they delved into this mystery, the more dangerous it would become. But he had a single thought that kept him moving forward. He was closer than ever to the truth, and nothing would stop him from finding it. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. House was eerily quiet as Poirot and Evelyn returned, their footsteps echoing through the halls. The weight of the secret that had been unearthed between them seemed to press down on the very walls, thickening the air with tension. Poirot's mind, ever calculating, had already begun to piece together the few fragments of the puzzle that Evelyn had shared with him. But he knew that time was running out. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been hiding in the shadows, would stop at nothing to claim whatever was buried beneath the estate. We must act swiftly. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, breaking the silence as they reached the foot of the grand staircase. Your father's discovery, whatever it was, cannot remain hidden for long, and I have a feeling that those searching for it are already in motion. Evelyn nodded, her face pale but resolute. What should we do now, Poirot? How do we stop them? Poirot paused, considering the best course of action. First, we must return to studying. The scroll, the map, it is the key. I believe that once we understand its true meaning, we will know exactly what we are up against. Evelyn hesitated, but only for a moment. What if they are already there? What if they found the scroll? Poirot's expression hardened with determination. Then we will beat them to it. The two of them moved swiftly through the house, making their way to the study. As they entered, Poirot's eyes immediately went to the desk where the scroll still lay undisturbed. It seemed almost to perfect like a trap waiting to be sprung. Poirot took a slow step forward, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk as he examined the scroll. The symbols on its surface, the writing, it all seemed to carry a weight far greater than any ordinary poem. He had seen such things before, ancient codes, hidden messages meant to be deciphered by those with the right knowledge. But what was the message here? What was the riddle Lord Geoffrey had been so desperately trying to solve? We need to examine this carefully, Poirot said, turning to Evelyn. The key to this mystery is in the details, each symbol, each word. Your father must have uncovered something important. Evelyn stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the scroll. But I don't understand any of this, she said softly, her voice tinged with frustration. It's all so cryptic. Poirot smiled faintly. That is the nature of such puzzles. They are meant to confuse, to distract. But if we look closely, if we focus on the patterns, we will find the truth. He gently unrolled the scroll further, his eyes scanning the words and symbols with practiced precision. As his gaze shifted over the ancient text, something caught his attention, a small, almost imperceptible detail near the bottom of the scroll. It was a set of faint, smudged markings, barely visible against the faded parchment. Poirot's heart skipped a beat. "Ah," he whispered, bending closer to inspect it. "Here it is." Evelyn stepped closer, her curiosity piqued. "What is it, Poirot?" Poirot carefully traced the markings with his finger, his mind racing. "It's a map, a very old one, hidden beneath the poem. But this is not just any map, it is a map of the estate, of the very land upon which we stand." Evelyn's eyes widened. "A map of the estate? But why would my father hide something like this in a poem? And why wouldn't he tell me about it?" Poirot turned to face her, his eyes serious. "I believe your father knew that this map would lead to something far more dangerous than he was willing to reveal. And now, someone else is after it." Evelyn swallowed hard. "You mean someone killed my father because of this?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Yes, mademoiselle. Whoever was behind Lord Geoffrey's death was after this map. It's the key to whatever is hidden beneath the estate, and they will stop at nothing to get their hands on it." Evelyn stepped back, her mind reeling from the implications. But where does it lead? What's beneath the estate? Poirot's expression grew more intense. "I don't know yet, mademoiselle, but we will find out. We must." He carefully rolled the scroll back up, placing it gently in the center of the desk. The map, now revealed, was far more valuable than anything they had anticipated. But the question remained, what lay beneath the estate that was so valuable? What secret had Lord Geoffrey uncovered that had led to his untimely death? Just as Poirot was about to speak again, the door to the study creaked open behind them. A figure stepped into the room, a familiar figure, one that Poirot had not expected to see again so soon. It was Dr. Ravenscroft. His expression was unreadable, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the two of them. "I see you found it," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension. "The scroll, the map. You should have stayed out of this, Poirot. It's far more dangerous than you realize." Poirot stood still, his gaze locking with Ravenscroft's. The game had shifted once more. Ravenscroft knew more than he was letting on. And now the confrontation had begun. "You've been following us, Monsieur Ravenscroft," Poirot said, his voice firm. "But I believe it is you who have been hiding something from us." The scholar's lips curled into a faint smile. though there was no warmth in it. "I warned you, Poirot. Some things are better left undiscovered." And with those words, the air in the room seemed to thicken, as though the tension had reached its breaking point. The truth was closer than ever. But now it was clear someone would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. The confrontation was unavoidable. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. Heath. Tension in the study was palpable, thick with the unsaid words and the shifting dynamics between Poirot, Evelyn, and Dr. Ravenscroft. The scholar's presence in the room was no coincidence, and Poirot knew it. Ravenscroft's cryptic words hung in the air, adding to the weight of the mystery that had been slowly unraveling. Since the murder of Lord Geoffrey, Poirot's gaze never left Ravenscroft's face. The professor, with his composed demeanor, was clearly hiding something, his quiet confidence betraying a deeper knowledge of the situation. He had been involved with Lord Geoffrey for years, and Poirot suspected that the secrets they had shared were far darker than anyone had realized. "You warned me, Monsieur Ravenscroft," Poirot said, his voice steady but edged with purpose. "But you should have known that I would not stop until I uncovered the truth. And now we are very close, are we not?" Ravenscroft's lips curled into a tight smile, his eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and something far more dangerous. "You think you know what's at stake, Poirot. You have no idea." He paused for a moment, looking at Evelyn, who stood beside Poirot, her face a mixture of fear and determination. "You shouldn't have brought her into this. She's better off not knowing what her father truly uncovered." Poirot took a step forward, his mind racing through the possibilities. Ravenscroft had just confirmed what Poirot had suspected. This was no longer about a murder. This was about something far more significant, a secret hidden beneath the estate, something that could change everything. But what was it? And why had Ravenscroft, who had been so close to Lord Geoffrey, not been forthcoming about the truth? "Monsieur Ravenscroft," Poirot began, his voice firm, "it seems you know far more than you're letting on. What is it that Lord Geoffrey found? What is this secret beneath the estate?" Ravenscroft's expression hardened, and for a brief moment, Poirot thought he might refuse to answer. But then, with a heavy sigh, Ravenscroft spoke again, his voice laced with bitterness. "You wouldn't understand, Poirot. No one does. Geoffrey was foolish, thinking he could change the course of history by digging into things best left buried." Evelyn's voice, soft but urgent, cut through the tension. "What is he talking about? What is this secret? Why is it so dangerous?" Ravenscroft's eyes flickered towards Evelyn, and Poirot could see the internal struggle within him whether to reveal the truth or keep his silence. After a long moment, he finally spoke, though his words were measured, as if each one had been carefully chosen. "The Devereux family's wealth doesn't come from simply owning land, mademoiselle. It comes from something older, something far darker. Lord Geoffrey uncovered a set of ancient texts, some of the oldest known to mankind. They weren't just poems or stories. They were instructions maps, if you will, that led to something buried deep beneath this estate. The land was built on a secret that goes back centuries, a secret that many would kill to protect." Poirot's mind raced as he absorbed Ravenscroft's words. "A secret? What is it? What is buried beneath the estate?" Ravenscroft's gaze shifted towards the desk where the scroll still lay, the map half hidden within its folds. "It's a location, a place where an ancient artifact was hidden long ago, an artifact of immense power. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. Lord Geoffrey thought he could find it, unlock its secrets, but he underestimated the consequences." Evelyn's eyes widened as the realization dawned on her. "You're saying that my father was killed because of this artifact, because someone wanted it?" Ravenscroft's lips tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot took another step forward, his thoughts racing. He had suspected as much. There was more to Lord Geoffrey's death than mere personal or familial conflict. This was about something far bigger, something that could have global implications. An ancient artifact, hidden beneath the estate, one that many were willing to kill for. "Who else is involved, Monsieur Ravenscroft?" Poirot asked, his voice low but firm. "Who is behind this?" For a moment, Ravenscroft's expression shifted, as though he was considering whether or not to reveal the full truth. But then his expression darkened, and he took a step back, as if preparing to make a decision. "There are people," Ravenscroft said, his voice tight with urgency. "People who will stop at nothing to get their hands on what's hidden here. And I'm afraid," he added, his eyes flashing with anger, "you've already attracted their attention. You're not the only one looking for the truth. There are others, and they won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way." Poirot's pulse quickened as the pieces began to fall into place. This was no longer a simple murder case. It had become a race against time, a deadly game involving ancient secrets and dangerous people. If Ravenscroft was right, then Poirot and Evelyn were in grave danger, and they had to act fast. At that moment, the door to the study suddenly burst open with a loud crash. Poirot spun around, his instincts kicking into high gear, just as two masked men stormed into the room, their faces obscured by dark hoods. Evelyn gasped, backing away instinctively, but Poirot was already moving. He had no time to think, no time for hesitation. These men were here for one thing, the scroll and everything it promised. "Get down," Poirot shouted, pushing Evelyn toward the far side of the room as he reached for his concealed weapon. He would need to act fast, or this confrontation would end in bloodshed. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The room erupted into chaos as the masked intruders stormed in, their movements swift and purposeful. Poirot's instincts kicked in, his body moving with the precision that came from years of experience. He pushed Evelyn toward the far side of the room, his eyes locked on the two men as they advanced. They were fast, but Poirot was faster, his mind already calculating his next move. "Stay behind me, mademoiselle," Poirot ordered, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. Evelyn stumbled back, her eyes wide with fear, but she obeyed, her breath coming in short gasps. The masked men had drawn knives, the steel gleaming ominously in the dim light. They were prepared for a fight, but Poirot was not unprepared himself. His eyes flickered to the desk where the scroll remained, the key to everything, and he knew he had to keep it safe. The first intruder lunged toward Poirot, the blade flashing toward his chest, but Poirot sidestepped with a fluidity that defied his small stature, twisting the man's wrist with practiced ease. The knife fell from the man's hand with a soft clatter, and Poirot spun behind him, locking the man in a hold that rendered him immobile. "Not so fast, my friend," Poirot muttered, applying pressure just enough to make his captor wince, but not enough to cause serious harm. "You will tell me everything. There's no need for violence." The second man, more cautious than his partner, circled behind Poirot, eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. But Poirot was already several steps ahead. He knew the man would attempt to flank him, and just as the second intruder moved in, Poirot spun and kicked out with precision, knocking the man off balance. He stumbled back, and Poirot closed the distance, delivering a swift blow to his midsection that sent him crashing to the ground. Evelyn watched in awe as Poirot dispatched the two attackers with such ease, her heart still racing from the adrenaline. She had never seen him in action before, but now she understood why his reputation was so feared. "Are they dead?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No, mademoiselle," Poirot replied calmly, kneeling beside the two men and securing their wrists. "They are alive, though they will have much to answer for." He stood, brushing his hands off. "It seems our situation has escalated. These men, I believe, are part of the group that has been searching for the scroll. They will no doubt have information about who sent them and why they are so determined to find." What lies hidden beneath this estate? As Poirot tied the men to a chair, ensuring they wouldn't be able to escape, he turned back to Evelyn, who was still visibly shaken. Mademoiselle, I know this is frightening, but you must remain strong. The truth is within our reach, and we will find it together. Evelyn nodded, though her hands were still trembling. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would anyone want to kill my father over a poem, over a map? Poirot approached her, his face softening with understanding. It is not just a poem, mademoiselle. It is a key. Your father's discovery, the map, points to something far more valuable than anyone could imagine. And there are people who are willing to kill to possess it. Evelyn's eyes widened, her confusion growing. But what is it? What could be so important? Poirot hesitated for a moment before speaking, as though carefully weighing his words. I do not yet know the full extent of the secret your father uncovered, but I believe that it is not just a matter of wealth or power. It is something that could change the balance of history itself. That is why your father had to die. Evelyn's face paled as she stepped back, pressing her hand to her chest. Are you saying that someone close to our family did this? That they killed Geoffrey for a map? Poirot nodded. I believe so, but not just any family member. There is someone here, someone who has been manipulating events from the shadows, someone who believes they have the right to control what your father uncovered. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. You mean Ravenscroft? Poirot's eyes darkened at the mention of the scholar's name. It is certainly possible. Dr. Ravenscroft had the most to gain from your father's obsession, and he was the only one who truly understood the significance of the scroll. But why not tell me? Evelyn demanded, her voice rising. Why didn't my father share any of this with me? Why was he so secretive? Poirot placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Your father, mademoiselle, was protecting you. He knew that whoever sought this artifact would stop at nothing to get it. He wanted to shield you from the danger that was closing in. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. But why didn't he trust me? Why didn't he tell me what was going on? Poirot's gaze softened with compassion. Because your father loved you, and he wanted to protect you from the horrors that would come if the secret were ever revealed. But now, it is time for the truth. We cannot let this mystery destroy everything your family has built. The sound of a door creaking open interrupted them, and Poirot turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for his revolver. But it was only one of the servants, carrying a tray of food. Looking bewildered at the scene before her. Monsieur Poirot, what is going on here? The servant asked, her voice quivering in fear. Poirot smiled reassuringly, though there was no warmth in his expression. Nothing for you to concern yourself with, madam. Please, take the tray to the kitchen. We will deal with these matters. As the servant left, Poirot turned back to the two restrained men. He knew that the final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The truth about Lord Geoffrey's death was within reach. But now, he needed to confront Ravenscroft once and for all. The time for guessing was over. The final piece was about to be revealed. Chapter 15. The final gathering study was dimly lit. The shadows cast by the flickering fire creating an atmosphere thick with tension. Poirot stood in front of the two restrained men, his back straight, eyes fixed on the puzzle that lay before him. The scroll, the map, the murder, it was all leading to this final moment. The answers were within his grasp, but the last piece was elusive, hidden just beyond reach. Evelyn stood beside him, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had been through so much already, and yet the final confrontation still awaited them both. Poirot knew the weight of the moment was not lost on her. She, too, had spent years in the dark, unaware of the forces at work within her own family, unaware of the terrible secret buried beneath the estate. Do you understand now, mademoiselle? Poirot asked softly, his voice steady, yet carrying the weight of all they had discovered together. This is not simply a matter of greed or ambition. It is far darker than that. Your father uncovered something that has been hidden for generations. And now, the forces that seek it will stop at nothing to get their hands on it." Evelyn nodded slowly, her expression one of resignation. "I still don't understand," she whispered. "Why is it so important? What is so terrible about this secret?" Poirot paused for a moment, his eyes moving over the room, as if searching for the final pieces of the puzzle hidden within its walls. "It is not just a matter of wealth or power, mademoiselle. The secret, the artifact, it is something far older. It holds knowledge that could change the world. And that is why someone who has been hiding in the shadows wants it. They will do whatever it takes to possess it, to control it." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "And you think it's Ravenscroft, don't you? He's the one behind all of this. He's the one who killed my father." Poirot's expression hardened. "It is certainly possible. Ravenscroft has always been the one most closely connected to your father's research, and he understood the scroll's significance better than anyone. But there is still one more thing we must uncover before we confront him." Evelyn took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "What do we do now?" Poirot's lips curled into a small, confident smile. "Now, mademoiselle, we gather the suspects. We bring them together, and we reveal the truth. We force them to confront what they've been hiding." The door to the study opened, and Lady Veronica stepped inside, her expression strained but composed. Behind her, Dr. Ravenscroft appeared, his presence a quiet yet undeniable threat. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, the tension rising as both Evelyn and Poirot turned to face the newcomers. "I knew it would come to this," Dr. Ravenscroft said, his voice low and controlled. "You can't simply leave things alone, Poirot. You're like a dog with a bone, relentless, always digging for the truth." Poirot's gaze never left him. "Indeed, Monsieur Ravenscroft, and it is that very truth that brings us here tonight. We have all the pieces now, and it is time for you to tell us what you know. What did your late friend discover, and why did you feel the need to silence him?" Ravenscroft's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something deeper beneath his calm exterior. "I didn't kill Geoffrey," he said slowly, his eyes glinting with something akin to bitterness. "But I do know what he found. I know what the map leads to, and I know why it must never be uncovered." Poirot took a step forward, his posture unwavering. "Then tell me, monsieur, why it must remain hidden. What is so dangerous about it?" For a moment, Ravenscroft was silent. Then, with a heavy sigh, he finally spoke. "It is an artifact, a relic from an ancient civilization, one that holds knowledge far beyond our comprehension. Geoffrey thought he could unlock its secrets, thought he could control it, but there are those who have spent centuries protecting it, ensuring that it never falls into the wrong hands. And Geoffrey, he couldn't see the danger." Evelyn's voice broke through the tension. "But why didn't he tell me? Why didn't my father share this with me?" Ravenscroft's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "Your father was trying to protect you, mademoiselle. He knew the danger, but he couldn't keep it from you forever. The scroll, this map, was his last attempt to find the artifact before it was lost again. But now it's too late." Poirot stepped back, his mind racing with the implications of what had just been said. An ancient artifact, knowledge that could change the course of history. It was clear now that Ravenscroft had been both a friend and a foe, an ally to Lord Geoffrey, in his quest for answers, but a betrayer as well, for his refusal to share the truth. "What do you want, then, Ravenscroft?" Poirot asked, his voice low, steady. "What is it you intend to do? Are you willing to let this artifact remain hidden, or are you desperate enough to take matters into your own hands?" Ravenscroft's gaze turned hard, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something dark in his eyes. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that no one can use what Geoffrey uncovered for their own gain. It's not just about power, it's about survival. The world isn't ready for the truth. And neither are you." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily between them. Poirot knew that the final confrontation was drawing near. The pieces were in place, and the truth terrifying, dangerous. An ancient was about to be exposed. But in that moment, Poirot also knew something more. There were more players in this game than he had originally suspected, and some secrets were meant to stay buried. The final piece of the puzzle had been found, but the game was far from over. Chapter 16. The revealed silence in the room was suffocating. Poirot stood, unmoving, as he took in Ravenscroft's words. The scholar's confession, albeit veiled in caution and urgency, had unraveled much of the mystery surrounding Lord Geoffrey's death. An artifact, hidden for centuries, now beckoned with dangerous promise. Ravenscroft's desperate attempts to control the knowledge, to keep it hidden, were beginning to make sense. But there was still so much left unsaid. Evelyn, still standing beside Poirot, was pale but resolute. Her eyes locked onto the man who had once been a friend to her father. The tension between them was thick, almost tangible, but her voice cut through it, trembling but determined. "You can't keep lying to me, Dr. Ravenscroft," Evelyn said, her voice growing in strength. "You've been a part of all of this, and you know more than you're letting on. What is this artifact? Why did it lead to my father's death? You have to tell me the truth." Ravenscroft's expression didn't shift, but there was a flicker in his eyes, perhaps regret, perhaps fear. His calm demeanor cracked slightly under Evelyn's unwavering gaze, but he remained composed, as if the weight of his words had already been calculated long ago. "I did not kill Geoffrey," Ravenscroft said quietly, his voice cold, but there was a sense of finality in his words. "But I will not allow anyone to claim what he was seeking. The artifact he uncovered, it's not just a relic. It's the key to unimaginable power, and for centuries, those who understood its true nature have ensured that it stays hidden." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his sharp mind already connecting the dots, but he needed more. "And you believe you can keep it hidden forever, Monsieur Ravenscroft? You and your allies will... What are you prepared to do to stop the truth from being revealed?" Ravenscroft's lips curled into a thin smile, but it lacked warmth. "You've already seen the lengths some will go to. Geoffrey's death wasn't the first, and it won't be the last if it means keeping the artifact buried. If you think you can simply walk away from this and expose it, Poirot, you are gravely mistaken." The scholar's words were not just a warning, they were a veiled threat. Poirot understood that much. Evelyn, her eyes wide, turned towards Poirot for some kind of reassurance. She looked as if she were on the verge of understanding the full gravity of the situation, but was still struggling with the weight of it all. "Poirot," she said, her voice desperate, "why is it so dangerous? What is this artifact?" Poirot turned toward her, his expression softening. "Mademoiselle, it is not just about the artifact itself. It is what it represents, the knowledge hidden within it, the power it grants to those who control it. It is something that could alter the course of history itself. If it were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences would be unimaginable." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth as the realization began to sink in. "You're saying my father was killed because he was trying to uncover something that could change everything?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Exactly. Lord Geoffrey was not just searching for an artifact. He was searching for something that could give its possessor control over unimaginable knowledge, something that has been guarded for centuries, and there are those who will stop at nothing to ensure it remains hidden. They killed your father to protect that secret." The room seemed to grow colder as the words hung in the air. The implications of what Poirot had just said were heavy, and for the first time, Evelyn looked at Ravenscroft with a mix of disbelief and realization. The man who had once been a trusted advisor to her father was now exposed as a key player in this deadly game. "Dr. Ravenscroft," Poirot said, his voice firm, "you have been hiding more than just your knowledge of the scroll. You knew what your friend was searching for, and you knew the danger it posed. You could have warned him, but instead, you chose to manipulate him, using him to uncover the artifact for yourself. Ravenscroft stiffened, his eyes flashing with something darker than mere regret. You think you understand, Poirot? You think you've figured it all out? You haven't, not yet. There are things in motion here that are far beyond your comprehension. And you, too, will be swept up in it, just like your friend Geoffrey was. Poirot's gaze sharpened. You think I am afraid of what you and your allies will do to keep the artifact hidden? You have underestimated me, Monsieur Ravenscroft. I have seen men like you before willing to destroy everything, for the sake of their own twisted power. A tense silence followed Poirot's words. Evelyn, still in shock, looked between the two men, her eyes filled with questions and horror. So what happens now? She asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Poirot's eyes never left Ravenscroft's. Now, we end this. We expose the truth, and we ensure that whatever is hidden beneath this estate stays buried. The world is not ready for the power that lies in the artifact, and neither are you. Monsieur Ravenscroft. Ravenscroft's smile was tight, almost knowing. You think you can stop this? You think you can just walk away with the truth? There are far more dangerous people than me, Poirot. People who will kill to ensure that the artifact remains hidden. Poirot's lips curled into a small smile. Then we shall see, monsieur. The truth always has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply it is buried. As the tension in the room reached its peak, Poirot turned to Evelyn, his gaze softening. Mademoiselle, we are not done yet, but we are closer than we have ever been. With those words, Poirot knew that the final act of this dangerous game was upon them. The truth, though elusive, was within his grasp, and no one would stop him from uncovering it. Chapter 17. Outcome and justice. The storm outside had begun to pick up, the rain pouring in torrents against the windows as if nature itself was trying to drown the secrets buried within the Devereux estate. Inside, the fire in the study burned brightly, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Poirot stood, looking over the assembled group. The time had come, the moment of reckoning. Ravenscroft was still standing, his posture rigid, eyes darting around the room with a sense of nervous anticipation. His calm exterior had begun to crack, revealing the tension he had carefully concealed beneath his academic demeanor. Evelyn sat by the fire, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as though she could will herself not to crumble under the weight of the revelations they had just uncovered. She had come so far, lost her father, uncovered a deadly secret, and now found herself at the heart of a mystery she never asked for. And yet, here she was, ready to face whatever it took to bring justice for her father. Poirot's gaze flicked to the two men still tied to the chairs. In the corner, Ravenscroft's silent accomplices, whose identities had yet to be fully revealed. The men had spoken little since their capture, but their eyes betrayed an unmistakable guilt. They were merely pawns in this twisted game, used by Ravenscroft and his shadowy allies to protect the artifact. Still, Poirot was no fool. He knew the truth was much bigger than just these two men, just as he knew the danger of what was about to unfold. The game had reached its final, fateful turn. Now, we gather the pieces, Poirot said, his voice cool but steady. He turned to face Evelyn, who was staring into the fire, lost in thought. Mademoiselle Devereux, you have suffered much already, but there is still much to be done. We must finish what your father began. Evelyn looked up, meeting his gaze, her eyes a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. What happens now, Poirot? What do we do with Ravenscroft? With the artifact? Poirot's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was little warmth in it. The artifact, mademoiselle, must remain hidden where it belongs. We cannot allow anyone, Ravenscroft or anyone else, to claim it. The world is not ready for such power, and those who seek it are far more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. Ravenscroft's eyes narrowed, his lips pressing into a thin line. You think you can stop this, Poirot? You're too late. The truth is already out there, and there are people coming who will see this through. They'll make sure the artifact is recovered. You're just a man. What can you possibly do to stop what's already in motion? Poirot's expression hardened, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. I may be just one man, Monsieur Ravenscroft, but I am not alone in this. You have underestimated the lengths to which I am willing to go for justice. And in the end, it will be the truth that prevails, not the lies you have woven around your precious artifact. Evelyn's voice broke through the tension in the room, softer but filled with a quiet strength. I don't care about the artifact anymore. I don't care about power or secrets. I just want to know who is responsible for my father's death. Who killed him and why? Poirot nodded, turning back to Ravenscroft. That is what we will uncover, mademoiselle, and we will do it together. Ravenscroft let out a dry chuckle, his voice laced with bitterness. You're still so naive, Poirot. Your father's death was no accident. It was a part of something much larger, a plan that stretches back centuries, involving people who are far more powerful than you realize. And you think you can simply expose it all, put an end to it. You can't stop them. No one can. Poirot met his gaze with unwavering calm. Perhaps you are right, monsieur, but I will do what I can. And in the end, it will be justice that triumphs, not your twisted ambitions. With that, Poirot turned to the two men still bound to their chairs. He took a step forward and addressed them directly. You two, you've been complicit in Ravenscroft's actions. But now, you will tell me everything. Who sent you? Who else is involved in this plot? The men shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but remained silent. Their eyes darted to Ravenscroft, as though seeking his approval, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on Poirot. The silence hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with the knowledge that the truth would soon be revealed. Poirot's patience had reached its limit. He stepped closer to the two men, his voice lowering, cold and firm. You may think you have escaped, that you have hidden behind Ravenscroft's influence, but you have not. I will make sure the law sees to it that you are held accountable for your actions. It's time to stop hiding behind him. The truth, gentlemen, will come to light whether you like it or not. One of the men, a tall figure with dark hair and an air of defiance, broke his silence. You don't know what you're dealing with, Poirot. There are forces at play here that no one can control. If you interfere, if you expose this, you'll put your own life in danger. We've been instructed to protect the artifact at any cost, and we won't stop until it's in the right hands. Poirot's gaze hardened as he turned back to Ravenscroft. And you, monsieur, you think you can escape the consequences of your actions? You have lied to everyone, manipulated them for your own gain, and now you think you can walk away unscathed? Ravenscroft's lips curled into a grim smile. I did what I had to do, what I always knew was necessary. And if you think that the truth will stop them from coming after what's hidden beneath this estate, you are sadly mistaken. You cannot undo what's been done, Poirot. Poirot stepped closer to him, his voice low and measured. I do not need to undo what's been done, monsieur. I only need to expose it. And in the end, that is what will bring you down. The truth always comes to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. For a moment, the room was silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. Poirot stood, unwavering, as the weight of his words settled over everyone in the room. The game had reached its conclusion, but the final moves had yet to play out. Evelyn, her voice now steady and filled with quiet strength, spoke again. What happens now, Poirot? What's next? Poirot's eyes flickered to her, and then to Ravenscroft, and the two men still tied to the chairs. He took a deep breath, his mind sharp and focused. Now, mademoiselle, we ensure that justice is served. We bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. It's time to end this. The final piece had fallen into place. Now, the truth would be revealed, and justice would be delivered. Chapter 18. The closing remarked room was charged with an intensity that had not dissipated since Poirot's declaration. The tension was palpable, thick with the knowledge that the game was nearing its conclusion. Ravenscroft, still seated, his face unreadable, was no longer the poised and collected scholar from the beginning. Now, he looked like a man on the brink of losing everything he had worked for, a man who realized too late that Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth had finally cornered him. Evelyn, standing with a quiet determination beside Poirot, seemed to draw strength from his calm presence, her earlier fear replaced by an unspoken resolve. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting fleeting shadows across the room, as though nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final revelation. Poirot turned to the two men still bound to their chairs. They had remained silent, their eyes darting nervously between Ravenscroft and the detective. They, too, understood that the end was near. There was nowhere to hide now. "You're silenced as you know favors, gentlemen," Poirot said, his voice cold yet measured. "It is time for you to choose: continue hiding in the shadows, or step into the light and face the consequences of your actions." The taller of the two men shifted in his seat, his defiance breaking. "You don't understand, Poirot," he spat, his voice strained. "There's nothing you can do. It's too late." Poirot's gaze hardened. "Is it too late for the truth to come out? Is it too late for justice? You may have thought you could escape, but you and your accomplice have been caught in the web of your own lies." Evelyn took a step forward, her voice filled with quiet authority. "Enough hiding. Tell us everything, or the law will deal with you. My father's death will not go unpunished." The room was silent for a beat, before the man spoke again, his voice now tinged with defeat. "It's Ravenscroft," he muttered, as if it were the only confession he had left. "He promised us safety. He promised we'd be protected if we followed his orders. But he's been using us all along." Poirot turned his gaze to Ravenscroft, whose expression had darkened further. "Monsieur Ravenscroft," Poirot began, his tone sharp, "you thought you could control everything. You thought that the artifact, the knowledge within it, would grant you power. But it is not power that you will have, it is the weight of your actions, and the consequences of your greed, that will follow you." Ravenscroft stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "It's too big. It's too dangerous. The artifact isn't just a relic. It holds the key to everything: power, knowledge, control over more than just this family. There are others who are willing to do anything to keep it hidden, to keep it in their hands." Poirot's eyes locked on his, narrowing with understanding. "Ah, I see. It was never about protecting the estate, was it? Not even about your loyalty to Geoffrey. This was about control, about ensuring that you were the one who controlled the knowledge, the power, that no one else could access. You manipulated everyone, from Lord Geoffrey to these men, to achieve your own ends." Ravenscroft's face twisted with a mix of guilt and fury. "It was the only way. They were coming for it anyway. I had no choice but to use them. All of them. Geoffrey, the de Verales, they were pawns in this game. I needed to be the one to control what they uncovered." Poirot's eyes softened, but there was no pity in his gaze. "You have made a great mistake, monsieur. You believed that by controlling the truth, you could wield power. But you are not the one who decides when the truth is revealed. That, Monsieur Ravenscroft, is beyond your control." As Poirot spoke, the door to the study creaked open once more, and in walked a figure that had been absent for far too long. Thomas, the butler, his face pale and drawn, stepped hesitantly into the room. Poirot's sharp eyes flicked to him, a flicker of realization in his gaze. Thomas had been more than just an observer in the background. He had been a player in this game, too, though he had remained mostly silent. Now, though, he seemed ready to step into the light. I didn't want any of this, Thomas said, his voice barely audible. I only followed orders because I thought it was the right thing to do. But it's too much. I can't keep hiding anymore. Poirot nodded gently. It is never easy, Monsieur Thomas, to come to terms with one's actions. But in the end, it is your choice to make. You can help us now. You can help bring everything into the light. Thomas met Poirot's eyes, his shoulders slumping with the weight of his decision. I will help, he said quietly, his voice firm now. I'll tell you everything I know. As the final pieces began to fall into place, Poirot's gaze shifted to Evelyn. She stood by the fire, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. The storm outside had finally abated, but inside, the storm of revelations was far from over. Evelyn, Poirot said softly, his voice gentle, your father's death will not be in vain. The truth has been uncovered, and justice will be served. Evelyn nodded, her face pale but determined. Thank you, Poirot, for everything. Poirot smiled faintly, though there was little warmth in it. Justice, mademoiselle, is not something that can be given or taken away. It is something that we must fight for, and in the end, it will always find its way to the surface. The truth is the most powerful force in the world, and now it has found its way to us, with the final words spoken. The room seemed to settle into a strange stillness, as though the weight of the mystery that had consumed them all was finally beginning to lift. But Poirot knew that even now, the game was not truly over. There were still those who would fight to keep the truth hidden, to suppress the power that lay buried beneath the estate. But Poirot had done what he always did. He had revealed the truth, piece by piece, until it was laid bare for all to see. And in the end, it would be justice that triumphed. As he turned to leave the room, Evelyn's voice stopped him. Poirot, what will happen to Ravenscroft? Poirot paused, his eyes flicking back to the man who had caused so much destruction. What happens, mademoiselle, is not for me to decide. But rest assured, justice will be swift. No one can escape the consequences of their actions. With that, Poirot left the study, knowing that the final chapter of this twisted tale had been written.